Hey everyone, Gravity here. Before the video begins, I simply ask that if you enjoy my content to hit that subscribe button below. Nowhere else on YouTube are you going to find a Battlefield player who's played with teams competitively since Battlefield 1942, nearly 18 years ago. Don't forget to subscribe, and please enjoy the video. Over the nearly 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there have been several great maps worthy of praise. A few of these go on to become legendary, icons themselves of the Battlefield series, and appear time and time again through game engine upgrades and subsequent iterations. This is not that story. This is the story of the maps that few want to play, and remember only because they were that bad. Maps which should never be remade. This is the story of the worst maps in Battlefield. I've waited 20 years to say this. Fuck you, Operation Market Garden. Damn, that felt good. Operation Market Garden is a vanilla Battlefield 1942 map based on the iconic Battle of World War II. It centers around the fight for Arnhem, and while a few key historic features are included, the translation of history to game design fails miserably. Not because it is simplified down due to technology constraints, but instead due to wildly short-sighted level design. Despite its significant limitations, DICE did get the main bridge extremely accurate. Later known as the John Frost Bridge after the commander of the British forces during the battle, it is the main feature of the map. The other asset of note is the church, which sits in a similar position as the real church of St. Eusebius, which found itself heavily damaged during the battle. Market Garden is a 4-flag map, and understanding the layout of these flags in relation to the main bases is critical to analyzing the flaws of the design. Starting from the south is the German main base on the south side of the river. It is the only feature south of the river with only German assets spawning here. Despite this, US players who somehow ended up over here are free to steal vehicles or harass all they want, as Battlefield 1942 didn't inherently have uncapped protection until server-side mods for it much later. Within the base, the German team has access to 3 Panzer IVs, 2 Tigers, 2 Kubelwagons, a Wesp mobile artillery piece, and a Hanomag troop transport. This is quite a lot of armor. However, this is BF 1942, and tanks are not the beasts they are in later titles. Dying quickly to bombs, anti-tank rockets, landmines, X-Packs, and taking heavy damage from grenades, of which all classes except the engineer start with 3. Their main base also possesses 5 flak AA guns positioned along the river. But get this, the Germans get no planes of their own. These exist entirely to deal with US aircraft, which I'll scream about later. A windmill on the far right side provides an enterable position for German snipers, which they frequently and infuriatingly used, much to the dismay of their own teammates. The Germans must rely entirely on armor numbers, and the first thing the armor needs to do is to make it to the flags. To do this, they must cross one of 2 bridges. The only way for the Germans to advance to the flags is to use these 2 bridges, the main Arnhem Bridge to the right and the smaller stone bridge to the left. Or, if you're infantry, to swim. Good luck with that. At the northern end of each bridge is one of the map's 4 neutral flags. Upon the initial round start, with no infantry or armor opposition, taking these points isn't a terrible issue, though for some players, it may end up as an unlucky catastrophe. On the west is the stone bridge flag, sitting next to the only building within 100 meters, a small stone bunker. Infantry spawn on this flag within the bunker and just outside, making an easy target. Since there are no other options, this bunker is the only place to hide for defense. As such, a single tank shell aimed inside will typically be rewarded with multi-kills. The stone bridge is much smaller than the main bridge, and is almost continually mined while the US team holds it. Regardless of which team does control it, no additional vehicles spawn here. On the east is the main Arnhem Bridge. Wider and far longer than its counterpart, you actually cannot see players on the opposite side due to its curved shape. However, infantry players can walk up its support arches and use it to snipe from. Guardrails meant to separate cars and pedestrian lanes cannot be jumped over from the center, so once a player moves forward across, they are isolated without any cover. Once across, a few tank traps and barbed wire are positioned to slow players down. The Arnhem Bridge flag is actually quite large and encompasses a good chunk of the bridge, as well as around the bunker to the right side and some of the lower terrain below the bridge. This lower section in itself is a complete pain in the ass because flags in 1942 must be entirely cleared before they can be captured. Any enemy hiding or standing fast can cause significant delays, and getting armor down here takes forever. Just like the stone bridge, if this flag is held by the Americans, German tanks can expect mines, explosive packs, and heavy resistance to the breakthrough. The Arnhem Bridge flag provides one troop transport vehicle to the controlling team. Less than 150 feet west of the main bridge lies the town of Arnhem, consisting of a flag in an open square surrounded by 10 copy-pasted buildings or so, 2 of which are the same enterable rubble kind, while a corner building is an enterable 3-floor structure. The flag radius here is exceptionally large, encompassing most of the buildings and even behind some of them. The structures with interiors make this flag frustrating to clear for the same reason as the underside of the bridge. A capture cannot be completed while a single enemy remains on it. Arnhem's close proximity to the East Bridge flag makes it the primary zone of combat on the map, while the Stone Bridge flag, maybe 100 meters southwest, is an open field, rife for spawn camping, grenade spamming, getting sniped, and farmed by tanks. While at times a busy flag, it nevertheless provides no additional vehicles to the controlling team. Moving north past a building or two, traversing open terrain, and walking all the way around the fence, players can find the church flag. This church asset is the same found on many 1942 maps and is enterable, containing an ammo box and medical cabinet. Depending on how a round is going, this flag can also be where all the primary action can be found on Market Garden. This is firstly because the flag radius is large and clearing it often takes a long time. Second, because it is the only flag on the map that when captured provides 2 medium tank spawns for the controlling team, though any player can steal them. And third, it is the closest flag to the American Airborne Paratrooper spawn point. This spawn point is only accessible for the US team and can be utilized regardless of which team possesses the church. Players spawn about 200 meters in the air with parachutes already activated. If they manage to land and survive more than a few seconds, it is almost always the church flag that players rush to in order to get health and resupply grenades. More on this later. This brings us to the US main, which is, unbelievably, just on the other side of this hill. Can German infantry climb this hill to reach the US main base? Of course they can. But why do that when you can just take the back road up behind the base where nobody pays attention? The German main on the other side of the map possessed exclusively tanks. The US main here possesses exclusively aircraft. With 2 P-51 fighters and 1 freaking B-17 on the barren runway, air dominance is all but assured on Market Garden. This sharp contrast where one team only possessed tanks while the other only had planes on a conquest map is extremely rare in the Battlefield series, especially in the way it's done here. And now that you know the flags, map layout, and vehicles, we can truly discuss what makes this map a catastrophe starting from the opening of a round. Aside from the planes, the US main has about 3 jeeps which are used to bolt out down the valley road at the start of the round. Like the German team, the US jeeps often, but not always, split up and head to multiple flags. With everything neutral at the start, this at least guarantees control of the church and its 2 Sherman tank spawns, giving the US team some early armor. The other jeeps almost always go to the Arnhem and Arnhem Bridge flags, and attempt to eliminate enemy infantry and win the point before the German armor rolls across. On the other bridge, it is almost always a clean German cap. But both flags need to be terrified of this motherfucker, which, even with a brain-dead monkey flying it, can wipe out a German push and all of its armor in a single pass. And at the start of the round, when players are clumped up on the flags, it happened all the time. Of course, the P-51s also attempted to make short work of the tanks with their bombs. I know what you're thinking. Gravity, these points have to be in range of all those AAs on the German side of the river, right? Well, yes, they are. However, typically, most of these go unmanned at the start of the round because nobody wants to be that bored player. On top of that, several of them are aligned in a row, allowing a B-17 bombing run to eliminate multiple at a time, assuming they were caught off guard. Lastly, this is only the first push. Sure, these planes can and did go down if they attacked straight down from the north, but if expert pilots were flying, or planes respawned, it usually didn't matter. The AAs were either picked off one by one based on the missing minimap icon denoting an active AA, or the pilots simply flew well enough to quickly escape the damage. The potency of the US aircraft cannot be overstated. Battlefield 1942 didn't have mobile flak AA tanks until the Secret Weapons expansion, and they were only on those maps. And it also didn't have Fliegerfaust. The only way to deal with aircraft in 1942 was to shoot them down with small arms fire, with another plane, or with a flak gun. On Market Garden, if the German team won the bridges, the battle moved outside of AA gun range and vision anyway. You might be thinking, oh, that's fine, there must be more AA guns on the map then. Well, there frackin' isn't. Short of luck, these planes are staying up there, including that beautiful sky goddess which ruins dreams. Because of the air supremacy, the US team frequently had little issue dealing with the masses of German tanks on their side of the map, and as a result often captured the flags of Arnhem, Arnhem Bridge, and the Stone Bridge. Another factor which led to this routine kraut spanking is the design of the main bases and vehicles within. The German main is enormous, consisting of wildly varied and spaced out spawn points, sometimes nowhere near vehicles. On top of this, there are no squad spawns or sprint feature, meaning players frequently had to trek all the way back to the bridges, and once there, pray to some gaming divinity that they would be able to cross the open terrain without getting shot, sniped, hit by grenades, bombed, or demolished by a tank. Because of the walking distance, German players would simply walk in piece by piece and get mowed down. Moreover, some players could be found inside the main waiting for specific vehicles to respawn. Jeeps, tanks, the transport, whatever, and this further spread the team and lowered players pushing the bridges. And on top of all of this, there is still that damned windmill, which like an idiot magnet would draw a few players to it without fail every game, thinking that they were going to help the team by sniping at a flag they could barely see. Conversely, the US team only had 3 planes in the main alongside a few jeeps. Without tanks, most players had no reason to respawn in the US main unless they really wanted a plane. This did happen to some extent, as who the hell wouldn't want to be in the B-17 on this map? Most players chose not to camp the runway, as the B-17 respawn timer was understandably super long. Additionally, because of the paratroop drop spawn point near the church, there created even less incentive to spawn in the main. As a result, the vast majority of a full 32-player US team pushed like a horde into the map's flags against a German team, barely able to figure out which way to go, which AA to sit on, which vehicle might be respawning soon, or which bridge flag might be defended least. And now you truly begin to understand the disaster of Market Garden. With both player numbers and air superiority, it was almost inevitable that the US team would capture all of the flags, both bridges, and have the majority of their team camping and fortifying the only two paths the other team needed to use. Mines were placed everywhere. Bazookas launched over the bridges, snipers tore infantry apart, X-Packs destroyed jeeps trying to make a fast pass. The German team simply could not move over the river in 80% of the games played. German players in desperation could swim the river, but with how slow it was, no defenses or ability to dive, without the ability to shoot back, and with the number of US players on the other side, it was also a frequently futile effort. However, a German loss was not a certainty. If the US team has morons in the P-51 seats, a useless B-17 pilot, or frequent crashes, the ground war could be salvaged. And in the event that a decent number of German players knew what they were doing in tanks, bridges could be captured, flags could provide the team with forward spawns out of the empty wastes of their main bases, and a coordinated push against the limited US armor could begin. The ability to neutralize a flag in 1942 with only a single enemy within the radius could make or break a team here. Simply losing a single spawn point might force a team back across the entire map. On Market Garden, this factor and the close proximity of the flags worked in the German team's favor just as much as it did on the US side, as they could recapture the majority of the flags within a few seconds and turn the game around. Taking the church flag from the US team would bring them 2 additional tanks on top of already high numbers. Not that they couldn't steal empty Shermans from the US side anyway. In the event that air dominance wasn't a factor, rare as it was, the German team could use the map design against the US, take every flag in quick fashion, and lock them in their own main. Once this was achieved, the pure stupidity of the US uncaps design quickly becomes apparent. First, there is the paratrooper spawn, which exists no matter what the flag situation is on the ground. But there is only the one predictable, almost useless location, and it's out in the open. German tanks, snipers, players of every class would move here to partake in the Great Airborne Turkey Shoot. The 50 cal machine guns on top of the tanks were highly efficient with clearing the slow-moving enemies. If you were on the US side trying to make it out alive, the best you could do was spawn, chuck all of your grenades at Germans on the ground, and try to make it to the church for cover. It was a killing spree. The US team really didn't have a choice in the matter. With no tanks, this was their closest spawn point to the flags, and the terrain around the main base was designed so that if you did spawn there, you had to walk over the open hill without cover, which could also be climbed in the opposite direction by the Germans, or you were forced to take a jeep down through a choke point. Additionally, along the west of the map, a lone road could bring German jeeps, tanks, and players right up into the rear of the runway, causing spawn camping and misery and, dare I say it, occasionally stealing the B-17. In this scenario, which was almost guaranteed if the US had bad pilots and lost the bridge, it was the US team which suffered an unbreakable contain. In this way, Market Garden demonstrates spectacular design flaws. First, in that its tight and minimalistic flag layout allows either team to achieve total victory in record time. Second, that its paratrooper drop could become both the US team's greatest asset or greatest misery, simply because there is only one location for it instead of a randomly moving point around the map. Third, that the design of both main bases were unspeakably disastrous in allowing for the possibility of an unbreakable base camp. Fourth, that the river and bridge design inherently make the map a containment of the German team in the onset. Fifth, that the map went out of its way to provide the US side with an unmistakable advantage through its planes and lack of any AA on the main area. And sixth, even without the unquestionable superiority of the US aircraft, the entire map was firmly US favored because of the terrain layout, choke points, and the mechanics of countering 1942's tanks. No doubt that during this video you may have seen things on the map or minimap that I failed to mention, such as additional tank spawn locations, German planes in the main, or BF-109s in the air, or even a flak gun in a different location. In the 20 years of 1942's existence, communities, players, and server owners have done their best to try and balance the map with server-side mods with limited success. Additional tanks tend to make the one-sided base camping even harder to break. The addition of German planes means that great pilots can turn the tide on the German side just as easily as US planes once decided the fate of the original map. AA guns near the church could destroy paratrooping infantry and just as easily down US planes taking off from the main who turned south too quickly. Ultimately, the occurrence of being completely one-sided matches on this map is still incredibly high on full servers, and it would not be possible without the clustered nature of the flag layout. Like dominoes, when one team gets going, one flag falls and then the rest follow. It is almost as if a single flag existed in Arnhem between two terribly close bases. Operation Market Garden has been played by the Battlefield community for 20 years now, and the map still causes immense levels of frustration, boredom, and annihilation, making some just sit out and wait for the next map to start. Sure, nowadays it's just expected. It's Market Garden. One of these teams is going to get screwed. But back in the day when it was just the vanilla version of the map, the toxicity was unbound. The hatred always loomed, and server populations could take a direct hit from German teams leaving. Market Garden is a complete failure of map design, a result of a level designer assuming that the real battle they are trying to recreate would be fun, but in the end just pisses all but a few players off. There are a number of Battlefield 1942 maps which are mediocre or just plain bad. It was the first game in the series. They all got a pass at the time. This definitely doesn't get one now.